Well, welcome everyone. This is the 2022 Palo Alto Weekly Election Forum with the two contenders for Santa Clara County Sheriff. I'm Palo Alto Weekly editor Jocelyn Dong, and joining me as co-moderator is weekly reporter Sue Dremen. Say hi, Sue.
Hi, everybody.
This event is part of the mission of the Palo Alto Weekly to provide accurate and reliable information to the community, so that you can make your own minds up about the issues that affect you. We are a member-supported organization, so if you believe in our mission, we humbly ask for your support by going to paloaltoonline.com/membership. Now, tonight's 1-hour debate is divided essentially into 3 parts. We'll have questions from Sue and me on a range of topics, some of which were submitted by our readers. Then we'll be taking questions for the candidates from you through the Q&A box that is at the bottom of your screen. So just type in your questions before 7:30 p.m. and we will choose 4 or 5 to pose to the candidates. And then finally, in part 3, we'll give the candidates time to ask a question of each other with an opportunity for rebuttal. Candidates will have 60 seconds to 90 seconds in general for their answers, and a timer is being shown on the screen to help them stay on track. So the election for sheriff is an important one, given that the departing sheriff, Lori Smith, is currently on trial for corruption and is leaving a department that has been plagued by scandal. Taking up that challenge to course correct the sheriff's office are our 2 candidates, Kevin Jensen and Bob Jonsen. Kevin Jensen is a veteran of the county's sheriff's office, working there for 37 years before retiring in 2013. He cites his insider experience as a strength, and Bob Jonsen has worked in the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department and led Menlo Park and Palo Alto Police Departments. He cites his 36 years of experience outside the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office as his strength. So now we welcome our candidates to introduce themselves through a 1-minute opening statement. We will start with Kevin Jensen.
Good evening, everyone. I actually am a person who worked inside, but fought from the inside and from the outside for the last 12 years against what we see now are bosses on trial in civil court. But it didn't always start that way. When I started, it was a gift. At 21 years old, I had 2 children born on Medi-Cal. My wife's father had been in prison. My father had been in the worst prison in the United States for armed robbery. I consider this a gift. I consider the life of service a gift. And I've served here, going through all the upper management areas, running the courts, running the jails, running patrol. And I've given back 100 years of service in nonprofits. You wonder, I don't look quite that old. Well, it's cumulative years, but I would love to be the person, because I have the trust of the people there and every law enforcement agency, Senator Cortese and Don Gage and Mike Wasserman and Blanca Alvarado, so many, and the union support, that I can help change because they trust me to change it. With 97% of the employees say that they want you there to change on transparency and also to change to bring ethics. That's what we need.
Thank you so much. Bob Jonsen.
Well, I want to thank you, the Palo Alto Weekly, for hosting this forum. I'm in Sacramento teaching mindfulness and compassion to the California Highway Patrol, so I greatly appreciate being able to join you tonight. You know, in a few weeks, voters are going to make a decision on who they want as their next sheriff. It's going to be either the insider who is deeply connected to the organization or an outsider who can bring a fresh perspective. And that's something that I've been fighting for quite a bit. I've had 3 chief of police commands, Lancaster Station, Menlo Park, and Palo Alto. I have support from quite a few of our local elected officials, Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, Mark Berman, Supervisor Smidian and Ellenberg, Palo Alto's mayor, vice mayor, 3 council members, as well as many other elected officials. We're going to need that collaboration to change this organization as we move forward. So I'm very excited to be with you tonight. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you both. And our first question will be from Sue.
Okay, so the first question is, why should we care? The sheriff is down in the southern part of the county, but how does your role as, and we'll start out with Bob on this, how does your role as sheriff impact our daily lives in Palo Alto and Mountain View? If you do your job poorly, what is at risk? If you do it well, how are we going to know?
Well, if we do it well, you're going to know right away. And one of the things that question's asked quite a bit about from elected officials, and how the sheriff can impact every city in this county immediately is to address the efficiency issues of the processing. And what I mean by that is anytime one of your officers makes an arrest, they have to take them down eventually to main jail if they're going to book them. And that can take up to 2 to 3 hours. That's been an issue for every chief in this county since I've been in the county, and that needs to be rectified. And there's ways to do it. And the reason that needs to be fixed and that efficiency needs to be increased is we need officers staying in the communities that they're hired to serve. High visibility is proven to lead to less crime. So having officers stay in your communities can be very impactful. That's going to be a priority of mine going in because it's an immediate add and an advantage to every city in this county. So I'm looking forward to changing that model.
Okay, now Kevin, you've got 1 minute.
Okay, Bob's right about the jail situation. I'm already working on the solution with the people who are there now and trying to find solutions with the nursing staff, which is what a lot of the issues is through that long questionnaire there. So that's true. But the real help needs to be in changing the culture of the jail. When we change that, you're going to benefit from a lot of different areas, and the culture of the organization and patrol, and then the leadership with all of the people that are law enforcement chiefs that I've come up with, that I've actually gone through the county with and led as the president of the California chapter of the FBI National Academy Association, where most of the chiefs come from. So with that, those relationships across the state and across the nation with FBI NA, which I was leading at the time, I believe that what we'll do is we will provide a framework of support that this sheriff has never done. We will be the resource center for all the local agencies. We will now have collaboration. The sheriff did not like to play well in the sandbox with others, and we've seen that now. But not talking about her, talking about me, I've always played well with everybody here, and we've always gotten along, and the opportunities for collaboration now are better than they ever have been with me.
Thank you. Back to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you. You've already brought up some change that you will make in the sheriff's office, so that's a great segue to this question. Please describe one specific reform you intend to implement in the operation of the department and one that you intend to seek through the next union contract negotiation. We will start with Kevin.
I think the first thing has got to be working with all of the different partners. I testified before the Blue Ribbon Commission. All of those 200 recommendations about the sheriff's office came out of there. I spoke many times there. I supplied the chair with all of the information. I supplied 35 correctional officers with the ability to testify or speak without their identities being found. And that was all the work I've done because I've been there for so long. But I think what we're talking about now is changing the process to say, we will be transparent. We're going to work with you. You're going to work with us to make sure we don't run afoul of personnel laws, that we're giving out something that legally we can't give out, but we should be able to give out everything we can legally give out. And as far as the union issues, the unions have all supported me. And the reason they supported me is because I have always told them, if it's fair, we will change a policy. If it's correct, we will work with it. But we have never given out anything. And many times I've had to tell the union no when I was negotiating with them. And they've accepted that because I've been fair.
And Bob, one reform operationally and one reform through contract negotiations?
Yeah, as far as operationally, one of the biggest issues is the lack of progress around accountability and transparency. I'm going to open that door from day one. That relationship with Mike Giannacco, who oversees the Office of Correctional Law Enforcement Monitoring, critically important for public trust. 3 years is too long to not have access to those records. So one of the things that I'm going to do operationally is look to expand his scope of work, just like we did here in Palo Alto, to not only include all uses of force, because right now he's only looking at use of force that leads to an investigation. I think we should be showing all uses of force, especially with what's going on with that organization. And I also want him to do a comprehensive review of the hiring process to make sure we're in line with best practices, because we're going to be recruiting for the future. And I want to have a mechanism in place that ensures we're recruiting the best.
Okay, well, this is a good segue with what you just said, Bob, because I'm going to start with you on this next question about transparency. Lori Smith famously refused to share required information with the Office of Corrections and Law Enforcement Monitoring. And what is your stance on information sharing, and what evidence can you point to from your professional experience that will convince voters of your sincerity around transparency?
Yeah, great question, but I've been doing it for 12 years as an executive, being very open and transparent, and I've spoken to that, and it's all verifiable. I worked with Mike Giannacco as an independent auditor in Los Angeles. I was part of a Department of Justice review that I led that organization through. In Menlo Park, we entered into the Obama initiative with data, open data process. We did that also in Palo Alto. We were also the first organization in Menlo Park, as far as San Mateo County, to put our entire policy online. And you know, here in Palo Alto, the entire policy is now online, and there's very, very few redactions. So we have done tremendous work over the last couple of years, especially around police reform. And I think that's all you have to do is look at my work over the last few years and the expansion and the accountability measures we put in place. I think it's a model for the county.
Okay, thank you.
My turn?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, it started with me very early on. I had to be a teacher, and that's what I did for 15 years, teaching ethics and leadership and professionalism. So when it starts there and you have 15 years built up with the people, some of them which are still there, have taken those classes from you, you gain their trust because you tell them the way it should be and that nothing it will ever take the place of the truth. We can't do it. The second thing is what I said before. I sat there, I'm still here. I ran in 2013, 2014. I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere because until this department is turned around, it gave me a chance and I'll never stop giving back. So I did go before the board of supervisors and ask them not to give the jails to Lori Smith. I put my own risk and my career at risk from that sheriff who's very vindictive. I went before the Blue Ribbon Commission. I've spoken. I have clearly been the person who has tried to show courage. I don't pat myself on the back, but no one else felt that they could go against that retaliatory nature there. So I've got the experience, it's all documented, and I helped the Blue Ribbon Commission come up with what they needed to do to make those recommendations.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the topic of jails and mental health care, but I did just want to remind our audience that if you have a question for the candidates, you can go to the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and just type your answers in there. We'll be taking questions in about 15 minutes. So on mental health care, how do you propose increasing the care of mentally ill inmates and detainees and ensuring that the abuses that occurred under Lori Smith and which cost the county millions in settlement agreements don't happen again? And how would you fund any mental health plan? We'll start with Kevin Jensen, and you have 90 seconds for this.
Okay, well, I've already started. I've had to be very careful with letting everybody know how many conversations I've had over the last 12 years. But when you have 97% of the employees endorsing you, it's pretty much everybody. And so I've got a list of what's going on there right now. And it's impossible to give that kind of care that we want when you're dealing with 35 and 34 officers on a shift designed for 70. We're running afoul of the lawsuit already. We're not giving people their out time. And when the mentally ill are not given a chance to get out. Now, we've also talked, and it'll probably come up later, about the idea of what kind of jail we have now and the ability to potentially build a new one, which has been in the planning phase for 10 years and is now $500 million over cost, if it ever exists. We need that designed with mental health professionals so that we have the murals, the day rooms, 5 times the ability to get somebody out of their cell with a healthcare professional. We have so much built in with healthcare professionals or mental health care professionals that we need another environment for people. It's not conducive right now where they are. So we're not going to build jails for people to keep filling them up. We need to take care of the people that we have that have severe and mild, all kinds of mental health issues, and also reduce populations by getting people programs. So I think for me, the best way to do it is to work with the mental health staff. I've already started making those inroads. While this sheriff is still here, I can't talk too much about it, but I will say the plan is exceptional. I think we're going to have something that's going to help everybody with their help.
Thank you. Bob Jonsen.
Yeah, I mean, every place I've gone, there has been a need for new facilities. But to Kevin's point, it's going to be years from now. I do believe it will happen, but it's going to be years. So we have to start addressing these issues today. We need to invest in that continuum of care for individuals who are struggling with mental illness or substance abuse by providing them a care paradigm that ranges from the secure housing and long-term inpatient care as a step down. And that's the thing that I think we need to work on, is one way we can improve access to care to be in compliance with the consent decree is really to partner with our educational institutions and offer an intern program that's expansive and inclusive. So students studying to be clinicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, we present a ratio of about 5-to-1, 5 interns for every trained clinician. That'll dramatically increase the access to care. They can do the preliminary screenings, the evaluations, and at least their inmates or the people in the housing community can actually have access to somebody. That's very, very important. Immediately providing that access when they need it is fundamental. So we need to reassess how we're approaching mental health and really normalize the environment. The environmental design of a facility is crucial for the health and well-being. And I think that's something that's exciting to be part of, but we have to start addressing it today. And that's one way we can do it. How we would fund that is like we did with our PERT teams. The county would be responsible for the interns, the jails, the sheriff's office would provide the supervision.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So we're going to head into misconduct in the field and in jails. And we'll start with Bob Jonsen, and we're going to do 90 seconds this time. The killing of George Floyd put a spotlight on excessive use of force among members of law enforcement. What is your position on deputies who don't intervene when they see excessive force being used? How would you train your officers regarding intervention? How would you make officers who use excessive force and those who don't intervene accountable?
Yeah, I mean, we've been dealing with that here in Palo Alto, right? I mean, that's a very relevant question. It doesn't matter whether it's Palo Alto or the county. Where it comes down to is accountability. Training is definitely a factor. I was a training instructor for Los Angeles for 6 years post Rodney King, where I was responsible for training the entire organization on use of force, the authority that officers have, when force can be used, the documentation of it, the review of it, all of it. Accountability helps mitigate liability. So that's first and foremost, making sure we have the accountability measures in place. I'm proud of the work we've done here in Palo Alto over the last couple of years. We have more accountability measures than almost any agency in the region. Officers have a tremendous amount of accountability, and there's an expectation. We've enhanced the de-escalation, the officer intervention, all those policies and protocols, as you know, we worked through quite extensively with our ad hocs through the summer of 2020 and into 2021. And by the end of it, we had dramatically expanded the scope of review under the independent auditor. I think that's very important. SB 1421 motivated us, meaning the profession, to start being more transparent on our significant incidents. I think we need to go further than that. I think all use of force incidents that result in injury should be public information and accessible. So I think that day will come. We're moving there slowly, but it's something I'm 100% behind.
Okay, thank you. Kevin Jensen?
I think this is something that is one of the things that means the most to me is you have to start with a group that you want to train that trust you. I have their trust, it's been proven. And the reason I have their trust is because I took difficult situations and I faced them and I fought for justice and I made it known what we needed to do. So transparency is something you can't just talk about as our current sheriff does. It's something you have to actually do yourself. That way the people that are there will follow you. The training, I think we focused so long on classroom training, and I'm for it. I believe, again, as a member of the NA, the FBI National Academy, I've got 17,000 contacts all around the world that I can call on for best practices. And I've used that and they've helped me. But I think that the biggest thing is getting the community involved. It's hard to sit across from somebody, listen to their stories of pain, and then not be moved and not have an epiphany, not have an opportunity for some kind of catharsis that says, I get it now. And so there are many people who love to share their stories in community groups that I've talked to already. I have a couple very powerful, moving stories about how it feels to be on the other side of law enforcement intervention, law enforcement force, and law enforcement misconduct. So if we can get people to come in and actually invite them in, open our doors, show real transparency, and have these conversations as part of a comprehensive training, I think then we get people who are motivated to do the right thing based on something that just clicked inside of them, or maybe it was already there but has now been reinforced.
Thank you.
Our next topic is in the area of crime reduction. Residents and business owners are fed up with crimes that are committed by repeat offenders. What innovative policies or programs or service models would you use to reduce crime and prevent recidivism in our county? We'll start with Kevin Jensen.
Yeah, I really love some of the things that have come down recently on things. Well, first of all, when I used to do surveys when I was a traffic sergeant, and when we did surveys on crime reduction, I thought it would be violent felonies. It was traffic. It was almost always traffic in my neighborhood. But that being said, we did things that would reduce traffic and to get people that were violating. And a lot of times it was people within the same neighborhood. But I think that the thing that we have to do now in order to reduce crime is use those models. Again, I have best practices that I can draw on, but a couple of the little ones that I really loved were a family member of mine just paid $3,000 twice for a catalytic converter that was cut out within a week. So some of the programs I've seen that have been recently, and people brought to me through these contacts, and I saw one in the newspaper, were not just etchings, but legislation, and Governor Newsom just put two into place, but I think we can go further that say that they hold the stores and the auto industry and the junkyards responsible for the precious metals and for reporting and creating a database. And they log the person's name and they take some identification. And this way, these people are not bringing in these things all the time. And it may sound small, but you wouldn't believe how many conversations people have had on those quality of life crimes, those seemingly innocuous things that cost people thousands of dollars. And as far as other crimes, I think we need to start using actual data. I believe that the reporting at the state level is so far behind, 2 or 3 years every time. We need to actually work together and form our databases collectively throughout the county because criminals don't know borders.
Thank you. Bob Jonsen.
Yeah, I mean, best practices that Kevin mentions is great that he can draw on. The reality is I've actually implemented them and I have proven verifiable success in doing that. And actually every city that I've overseen. When I was in Los Angeles, 3 years overseeing the Antelope Valley Crime Fighting Initiative, we received the James Q. Wilson Award for our success in reducing crime and building community relationships. And with everything that we've faced here locally over the last few years, I'm very proud of our accomplishments in Palo Alto in reducing crime in each of the past 3 years, actually lowering it to the lowest level in 2021 of all 3 of those years, even with the rise regionally in property-related crimes. You know, this was a partnership, though. It was between us, the law enforcement, the residents, the businesses, and we have to address crime impacting this county very strategically. And I've done that in all 3 of my commands. So I've accomplished it in the organizations I've led. And as I mentioned, I've received awards in 2 out of those 3 organizations for doing just that, reducing crime. I know it can be done here in the county. It has to be done strategically. This requires tremendous collaboration, commitment, and resources, and that requires money. There is $40 million that the Department of Justice has allocated for community policing in this upcoming year. We have to be very proactive in going after that money. I've done that in the past, and I'll do it for the county.
Thank you very much. Sue?
Yes. Now we're coming to the individual questions with rebuttals. These questions are coming from our readers, and we're posing a specific question to each of the candidates and giving you 90 seconds for an answer. And we will then allow the opponent a 30-second rebuttal. So the first question is for Bob Jonsen. You have said you increased transparency in your stint as Palo Alto Chief of Police, yet you, 1, removed internal officer investigations from the IPA and placed them in HR, and 2, you encrypted the police scanner unilaterally without even informing the city manager. How did you increase transparency? You have 90 seconds.
Yeah, that's a misinformed question. First of all, the investigations that were routed to HR, that was a process that was in place prior to my arrival. When I arrived, the fact is, I was informed of that, and I actually said that those third-party investigations should go down to the independent auditor. And as you know, those that have been involved, we worked through that process to finally make it a reality. And that's the reality, is that I think all incidents that are investigated involving law enforcement personnel should go to the independent auditor. So we have to know the details, because that is the fact of this. When it came to transparency and encryption, as we've talked about, and we spoke about it yesterday, very, very complex issue. This is something that addressed the whole county because we're under a regional agreement. So yes, we were the 8th city in the county to encrypt our radios. And I did do that, but I also did it at a time when we were dealing with police reform. We had just received major staffing reductions to include 4 managers, a communications manager, our technical services director. And at the same time, we were asked to increase our workload by putting in a new records management system, get ready for RIPA data, and all those things we accomplished. So we were able to work through bringing back encryption, as you know, Chief Binder announced it, by putting those pieces back together, as we did when we were able to restore our communication manager and technical services director prior to my departure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kevin Jensen, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
I think Bob Jonsen was faced with a difficult task. The only difference that I think he could have made in the beginning is to bring it before the group and say, there's not just one option, there's 2 options. I think that was the part that people got mad about. You have to let them know that you actually received a memo that said there were 2 options. If one of them was difficult, just tell them that and then get their help working through it. And that's it. I think it's a tough situation to be in, but you have to let them know the exact wording of the memo and why you're doing what you're doing, or ask for their help to do it the right way.
Thank you.
Do I get 30 seconds? I just forget to respond to that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, all right.
I did want to clarify one thing about the question. You said that was misinformed. I believe that they were referring to the December 2019 recommendation from the city manager and yourself to renew the contract for the IPA, but it no longer included the internal investigations. I believe that's what the
but the
question was
clarification was it never did include. That was the whole issue. When I arrived, those HR third-party reports were not going down to the independent auditor. So I think it's a nuance of that language, and that's what caused a lot of confusion. But if I can, I'd like to respond to what Kevin said, because he's right, is that one of the things we did, and I did, as I took accountability for just that, is when we made that announcement without my community advisory group's input or anybody else, I apologized for that immediately when I realized how important that was for the community. And we never stopped looking for solutions. As you know, as we put in the only calls for service platform in the county to try to make sure transparency was still important. And if you remember, I was also the only chief in the county that wrote a letter to the Department of Justice asking to be excluded from that while we worked towards options. So again, in a perfect world, I would have done it a little differently, obviously, greater transparency, but I didn't. But I had to make a decision, which I did, and I stand by.
Okay, thanks for that. And I think you've just changed our structure on the fly, so we'll give the rebuttal 30 seconds to rebut. So Kevin Jensen.
I would say that Bob Jonsen did the right thing by apologizing and just trying to make it right.
Thank you both. Kevin Jensen, your question is as follows. You have 11 police and sheriff unions endorsing you. What do you think that message sends to residents of Santa Clara County who read that police unions are often the primary impediments to reform? We'll give you 90 seconds. Bob Jonsen will give you 30 seconds for rebuttal. Then we'll give another 30 seconds, Kevin Jensen, for a rebuttal to the rebuttal if you wish. So. Okay.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what spin people want to put on it, because the reason they've endorsed me is because I've been fair. It's really great that you get all the police associations endorsing you and labor when you're running on a platform of transparency and accountability. And all the talks, the very first thing I told them in 2013 was, I will tell you right now that we want oversight. And the hush came over the DSA, Deputy Sheriff Association. That is not what they wanted to hear in the beginning. And it was a different DSA board. And it wasn't, I don't think, so much the oversight as they expected me to go in there and talk about different things. I believe that, and I know because I've had talks with all of them, not all the people, but all the associations, they have been under a rule in our area that has been disparate treatment. If you endorsed or gave money to the sheriff, you had a lot better shot at promotion, just like you got a lot better shot at a gun permit. So there's a direct correlation of how we've been run. It's wrong. I taught ethics. They see in me somebody who's a little bit doesn't fit the mold. I don't get labeled very often because I don't like labels. They send the wrong message. I'm tired. That's why I'm a no party preference. We got to stop the extremes from running the conversation. If somebody wants to spin it that I'm going to give them something extra, the only promise I've made is to treat them fairly. In fact, I've told them that when we negotiate, if it's fair and reasonable, we will come to an agreement. If it's not, we will not. And so I think that having somebody that they trust is the only way that people can actually make these reforms, that can be accountable. They want to be led, but they want to be led by somebody who claims that and does it themselves.
Thank you. And Bob, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I have a little different take on it. I mean, I think when those unions are putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into his campaign, it's actually sending a message, we want to shut this door and make sure it stays closed. And the reason I say that is when you look at the independent auditor's review, our last review, he commented that we actually ensure he has access to necessary materials, which is unfettered, and that we remain open to criticism and reform, to where the sheriff's office has unfortunately not even given partial access. And that is unacceptable after 3 years.
Okay. And Kevin, response for 30 seconds.
I think Bob just made my point. I've been saying the same thing. It's unfortunate and wrong after 3 years. And I've been saying it loudly from the rooftops to whoever listened for 12 years. So I think that that's why I'm being selected. I know it is. And, you know, I know what's happened in Palo Alto. I won the city of Palo Alto in the election, and I think there's a reason for that. I think that people are not happy with the leadership there, and it's a tough job. And I don't want to disparage my opponent, but what I will say is there's a reason they want somebody different in Palo Alto as well as the unions too.
All right, thank you. Sue will take the next question, and it's the first one from our live audience. And these questions will have a 90-second time limit for answers. Sue, will you go ahead?
Sure. The first question is from Amani Hamid, who is a Metro Metro Silicon Valley. And this will be for Bob Jonsen. What is your position on homeless encampment sweeps? Do you plan to continue them? And if so, how and why?
Yeah, no, I mean, my position on, well, homelessness, the whole issue is multifaceted, obviously, and it's a major concern. I think 9 out of 10 residents that were surveyed, it said it was a major concern for them. But I want to go about it very responsibly, kind of like we're doing here in Palo Alto and have done, is really give them the services they need when they need it. I'm extremely proud of the implementation of the PERT program, the Psychiatric Emergency Response Team. As you know, that's a mental health clinician in the car with an officer. Generally, they're responding to mental health crisis calls, but when they're not, they're addressing homelessness issues, not by moving them along, not by conducting sweeps, but by connecting them to the services they need. Why I'm so proud of that and why I'm so optimistic about the county is when you take that model and you start building upon it and expanding it through the county, which I plan to do dramatically. I think that there needs to be an emphasis on those programs. But when you compound it with and multiply it with the layers that are being built with the mobile response teams, as well as the trust program in the county, that gives 3 great opportunities to redirect people other than incarceration. So it's a model that I'm looking to build upon. I think we're perfectly positioned to do it. And I think Santa Clara could be the model for the rest of the country in how we address homelessness issue.
Okay, thank you. Kevin Jensen?
Yeah, I think that what needs to happen is if somebody's going to do a sweep, that they need to be working with the CBOs, and it's not, a sweep doesn't even, to me, seem like it's the right thing. I think that what we need to do is go in, if there needs to be somebody moved because there was a violation of the FAA area, then I think we need to be in there, not just the police. We need to be in there with the CBOs. I've been recently working with Silicon Valley Agape, and we've been trying to work with people, understand their needs. Bob is absolutely right. It is a myriad of reasons why people are homeless and why they're out there. There's everything from loss of job, some mental health issues, there's some substance abuse, there are situations with domestic violence. And the unfortunate part is I believe something has to be done, because while they're there, and I've heard it from people there, and I saw it on the news the other night, one of the ladies looked around and was like, it's dangerous here. So sometimes when people even take the homeless and prey on them, sometimes it's somebody goes to the homeless encampment to prey on them. We've seen, unfortunately, some real bad rats and the refuse, and there's no place to put the waste. And so to me, it's one of those things that tugs at your heart that says, we've got to do better. I think one of the ways that would really help is for everybody who has a great heart, who's doing this, all the CBOs and wonderful community groups, we need a lead. We need a county lead to organize these efforts and say, let's stop tripping over each other. Let's come to some kind of agreement on how to do this. And right now, I don't see any lead structure that would be there. I think we need an office, somebody who's going to help. And that's what I believe we should do.
Thank you.
Our next question is a bit of a pivot to personal character. What do you see as your own next area of personal growth? We'll start with Kevin.
Every day, I start my day with that opportunity. Some people try to twist a faith that I have, and Lori Smith started that in 2013. She thought if she had nothing else to go against before, what she'd do is she'd take a faith that is non-judgmental, that believes that we need to love each other and treat each other as we'd like to be treated, and let's make that into something really ugly and distort who his character is. And it did. It scared some people. Who wouldn't want to wonder if maybe the guy's a closet wacko or racist or something? So for me, every morning I start trying to grow. Every day I need to be a better person. Again, I came from a family that was different. I mean, my mom had every kind of abuse. That's why I still donate to the tree house for sexually, physically, and emotionally abused children. And her picture is on the cupboard over there because she was one of all three. My father, again, had a rough time, but he got rehabilitated. I believe in rehabilitation. My wife's father's rehabilitated. So for me, I don't think I ever stopped growing. I am always thinking about the issues, and I try to put myself in other people's feet and sometimes or shoes, and sometimes it works and sometimes I need help. So sometimes I like to have these conversations with people about how I can get better. I have one running partner that will absolutely tell me what I've said wrong, what I've said right, but I do it in a safe space where nobody's canceled. He actually sits there and tries to educate me, and I think I've given him some too. So I think that my next area of personal growth is every day it's going to be a new area, and every day I want to be better, and not, I think by nature we're a little bit selfish, and every day I try to die to that a little bit.
Thank you so much. Bob Jonsen.
Yeah, for me, it's pretty simple. I need to keep working on cultivating compassion. And, the irony of that is I'm actually a certified instructor for the Compassion Institute to do just that for public safety and public service. And one of the things that this pandemic and all of the issues that we faced in the last few years made me realize is I still have blinders. I mean, I was so engaged with the community issues during, the summer of 2020. I was blind to what was going on with our own workforce. We're a very stoic workforce. We just seem to take it and we keep moving forward, but they were hurting. And it wasn't until an officer came in and said, hey, we need you here, not out there. And it was the first time that I'd realized I thought I was doing my job in addressing all the community engagement issues and really working through police reform, but it was at the expense of my own personnel. So even though I've been an executive for many years, I still have a lot of room for growth, especially with connecting with people. And that's something I'll never stop doing. And I really appreciate, though, having people around me that are willing to come through that door and say, hey, this isn't working. We need to do this. And that interaction alone led to us forming Palo Alto's internal solution group, which was a phenomenal idea by one of our officers to really address the morale issues in the organization by strategically coming up with objectives and playing them out for the workforce. So I'm really proud of that officer for making that recommendation, and I'm proud of the management team for stepping aside and letting it happen.
I appreciate you both answering that question. Thank you. Sue?
Okay, the next question, we'll start with Bob Jonsen on this one, is what is your plan to reduce recidivism and streamline prisoner reentry from our county jails and from state and federal prisons back into our communities?
Yeah, I think that is a question we've been asked a couple of times over the last few months, and one I'm very passionate about. I think we need to pull substantial amount of resources that are allocated at the state level for rehabilitation to the county level. We are housing individuals longer, and from day one, they should have access to a different direction. And what I mean by that, I want to change the institution into an educational facility. So when somebody comes in, if they need an education, they go down that path. If they need a work skill, they go into a certification program. We need to partner with the industries out there to really train individuals that are housed in the justice system to be prepared for reentry into a free society. With the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIP Act, there's going to be a tremendous amount of money coming down for certification programs. I think in the green workforce alone, it's estimated like 90,000 jobs over the next 2 years where they'll have to train people. We should be going after some of that money, that grant funding, to put the certification programs into the correctional environment. So from day one, they can start down that path. And that could also be an alternative to incarceration. If somebody's already educated and capable and qualified to do specific jobs, they should be able to go into that intern program as part of their sentence to, again, have the ability to be productive in our society.
Thank you. Kevin Jensen, how would you respond?
What we have to do from the very beginning, and I agree with Supervisor Ellenberg on this and so many others, we have to start funding mental health help on the front end. We cannot wait until somebody ends up in the jail because they've committed a crime based on something that could have been treated earlier. We have no real solutions. There are some people trying very hard with a limited budget and limited resources, but we need those facilities that will accomplish mild to acute mental health help. And I think that we shouldn't have to just say, well, then we're going to take all the money from law enforcement, because we still need to do our jobs. People are lock them up or let them all out, build it or don't build it. I think that we have to sit there and say, what is the balance? How are we going to get the balance right so that we can fund both to what they need to be done? Everybody says they want it, but who's willing to actually say I'm willing to pay for it? So I would like to have that conversation. We definitely don't want to overtax everybody, but we definitely need people to have that conversation. The job training is crucial. I believe that the system, the jail management system, which we've been waiting forever, is going to give us the ability to track people, not right before they get out, but from the time they get there, know their needs now and start planning for their release. With some of the things that Bob has said through CASU, which has been working to work with people as alternative sentencing, but also we started something that was reuniting women with their children. We got the Harvard Award for that when I was assistant chief. So I think we have to be creative and work with Office of Women's Policy, who I worked with extensively when I was there, and others to make sure that we are treating them while they're there, not when they get out. And when they get out.
Thank you.
All right, our next question is from Julie Hennig. How do you plan to enforce the new California statewide laws to minimize gun violence and ghost guns in our communities? Kevin Jensen, you're up first.
I think that there's been a start, and there's some people doing a lot of work in a very dangerous area. I attended the ghost gun class that was taught by some people that were experts, and it is starting to, the stats are starting to show that the guns taken off the street now are less and less stolen or regular guns, but they are ghost guns with different parts and receivers that are manufactured. And what scared me was that these are actually being made with these 3D imagers. And it's not like before where you had to find one or two kingpins who know how to do it. Anybody can do it. And so I think the way to do it best is to work with the experts who are already ahead of the problem. We have to collaborate again within our county. The sheriff should be a resource for all of us in the county, and every law enforcement agency, including probation and parole, are going to work together to say, what are the trends? Where's the database? We do have a couple databases, NIBRS and others, that are working, but how are you going to track ghost guns? We actually have to have ballistics to track them a lot of times. So we actually have to start getting who's been arrested with one, track them back, and find out who's making them. And then we get somebody that actually makes them. Those are the people, we have to hold those people accountable. I know that people are against some stronger sentences, but for somebody that's making and proliferating ghost guns, I'm calling for a harsher sentence.
Thank you very much. Bob Jonsen?
Yeah, I've been involved in gun violence reduction programs since I was a deputy in Los Angeles when I was working with the LA County Office of Education Safe School Center, where we actually developed a weekend immersion program for first-time weapon offenders. I think we need to get back to educating young men and women of why they shouldn't carry a gun in the first place. The gun violence in our country is at an epidemic level. I think there's 415 million guns out there in circulation. We have to do more to reduce gun violence. I'm extremely proud to have that gun sense candidate distinction by Moms Demand Action, because if we don't start working towards this, we're going to continue to have problems. The evolution of ghost guns, we saw it at the gun buyback recently, where those are being dropped off. The ease of making them has become too easy. We have to have accountability. We have to start holding people accountable for when they violate gun laws. And there's plenty of gun laws on the books. We need to just start enforcing them so people don't feel so compelled to carry guns and actually use them in our society. There's a lot we can do in our schools. As I mentioned, I've done a lot of that work. I wrote the recommendation report for the LA County Sheriff's Department on school safety protocols. Many of those protocols were implemented and are still in place today to keep our schools safe. And if we don't start working with our schools, our hospitals, our businesses, and gun safety laws and protocols, then shame on us. We can do better.
All right. We're going to move into the third part of our debate tonight. This is when you get to ask a question of one another. So the question portion will be time limited to 30 seconds. The answer to that question will be given 90 seconds, and then we'll give a 30 seconds for the rebuttal. We will start with Kevin Jensen. Please ask your question.
A lot of people from places you've worked had asked me to do things or say things to you that I'm not going to do. I wouldn't. But something was brought up at a forum the other day, so it didn't get answered. I'll ask it today. When did you get the Viking tattoo on your calf, and is it still there?
Yeah, I love that question, and I love that myth. The reality is, and that was asked by Dave Price before the primary, I do not have a Viking tattoo on my leg, nor did I ever work Linwood Station. The scrutiny that's going on in LA right now with the gangs, the cliques, and everything else is unacceptable. And that's how I addressed that question last week. Unacceptable. That goes back to accountability. There should never have that tolerance for gangs. You know, tattoos are one thing, and I also addressed that. Tattoos in policing is a big issue. It's a popular issue, especially with the younger officers. It's an issue, in fact, we took to our Palo Alto Community Advisory Group to ask them, because the officers wanted to wear or be able to show their tattoos. They feel that it's a work of art. Well, the community group didn't feel that was appropriate for this city. Every city is going to have to address that differently. There's been a review in Los Angeles since I was an officer down there in 1990s. It has been scrutinized by the Colts Commission, the Department of Justice, the FBI, as well as the current commission. My name has never been associated with the deputy gang. There's a database, lasdgangs.com, that has hundreds of officers in there. My name is not part of that. When I left the organization, I received the Exemplary Service Award for my 27 years of service. So I will say on the record, to your question, I do not have a Viking tattoo, nor did I ever work Linwood Station.
Kevin, would you like to respond to that? If so,
Yes.
You have 30 seconds.
Sure. So people that I trust have told me they saw it. And if it's gone now, I'm very glad. And I hope that you made that right decision. I didn't even ask why you put it there. I just know that the way you answered it was that you don't have it and it was never a Linwood Station. And that's fine. It was asked at a community forum. That's the only way to brought it up. I'm not going to bring up the other things because I just don't play that way. But since it was asked before, that was what I asked. Thank you.
Do I get to rebut that as well? It's okay. Hey, you can just check the records. I never worked Linwood Station. It's an easy thing to verify. And as I said, I never had a station tattoo, a Linwood Viking tattoo, anything associated with Linwood. So, you know, that is a false perception. Do I have tattoos? Absolutely. And I've never denied that. But Viking tattoo is not one of them. And I need the community to clearly understand that. Thank you.
All right. Well, now you get to turn the tables, Bob. So you have 30 seconds to ask a question of Kevin Jensen. Kevin, you'll have 90 seconds to answer. And then Bob, you'll have 30 seconds to rebut. Please go ahead.
I think my question is relatively easy. Yesterday, the Mercury News reported that 47 Alameda deputies were removed from active duty after a review determined poor psychological exams when they were hired. We have both talked about bringing greater transparency to the sheriff's office. So will you, Kevin, tonight, if elected, commit to allowing the independent auditor to review all uses of force that occur within the sheriff's office, as well as conduct a comprehensive review of their hiring practices?
I will commit to allowing them to see whatever legally we can have, and that's an easy answer.
Response, Bob?
No, I think, I mean, I think they're legally a partner. So I think they have the right, whether it's in their scope, but you as a sheriff have the ability to expand that scope. So that was my question, but I accept his answer.
All right. It looks like we have a little bit of time still left. We're going to do a couple of questions more. And I think we're going to go to the issue of zero bail. Zero bail has ended in Santa Clara County. Proponents and opponents have their varying reasons for why they would like to see it either continued or reversed. And what is your stance on zero bail? We'll start with Kevin Jensen for 90 seconds.
I believe what's the problem most of us have with it, and I think even Bob has mentioned this before, is that we have got repeat offenders. We've got some problems with the system. I've heard that the judges are even debating this right now because I still talk to them from when I ran the courts. And again, I think the problem is going to be repeat serial offenders and violent offenders. We have to do a better job. I think the public tolerance has, you know, and that's what we listen to, right? We listen to our constituents. We listen to the people out there. They have grown tired of people like, look, something minor, like a repeat offender who keeps taking these catalytic converters. People think, let them go 5, 6, 7 times. And your daughter, your son, your wife, your husband, your significant other is having to pay that money. I think we have to do a better job of finding what the tolerance is for keeping people away from being a repeat offender, someone who's not getting it, someone who's been given a chance and has now rejected that chance. So I believe in rehabilitation. My family is very strongly into it because, hey, we've had family members, mothers, fathers, you know, but at the same time, we need consequences. And I think that's what people are getting back the pendulum to the middle, where we're saying, we're not going to lock everyone up. We're not going to let them all out. We're going to be mindful of how we do it. We're going to use alternative sentencing. We're going to look at disproportionate minority confinement. All these things are part of a process. And if we don't get it right, then we have what we have now. And I think that zero bail is another topic that we need to look at a little bit and refine it, get it right.
All right, Bob Jonsen.
This is a question we've been asked and we both answered, and I think we're both kind of in the same alignment. I mean, there does need to be that accountability piece, but I do believe that low-level offenders, and when I mean low-level, first-time property-related offenders, yeah, they should be able to get released, and especially if they meet a criteria that they have a job, they have a family they have to care for, because incarcerating them is going to create a lot of suffering for all involved. So I have no problem with citing individuals out, hoping that they come to court. But where we have the repeat offenders, and some of these are the organized crime that's occurring that are hitting multiple locations. And if we connect them to that multiple location, repeat offenders, past incidents, violent offenders, then I think there needs to be accountability. And especially with violent crime, we need to start holding people to not only protect the community, but to protect all involved. So I do like the fact that we're getting more advanced with technology. I think that's something that we should continue to grow, meaning the remote monitors. So when somebody comes in, low-level offenders, they can have a monitor, they can be attached, and then they can be released and get them out. And I think that's great. And I think we can probably expand that program as we start. Sheriff's Office implemented that this year or late last year. And I think that's something I definitely want to continue to grow.
All right. Well, we've come to the time of closing statements. I welcome each one of you to do one for 1 minute and 30 seconds. We'll start with Bob Jonsen.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, the fact is, here we are. The ballots are going to arrive in a couple of weeks. And what I'd ask you to do is don't worry about the name confusion. Just go down and find chief of police. And what that'll tell you is it's an officer or somebody that's equipped and prepared to take on these challenges. I have a proven record of using innovative approaches to keeping our communities safe, holding problem employees accountable, and really enacting the much needed reforms of the last few years. With everything going on in our society, I'm proud to be a Democrat. I'm honored to have the endorsement from Planned Parenthood. I'm humbled to have that distinction as a gun sense candidate by Moms Demand Action. And these are national priorities that I do think are fundamental, that any elected official, including your sheriff, should state where they stand, because those national issues, as we know, and we experienced years ago with immigration, could become local issues. So it's important to know what type of leader you're going to have in that position in the next 4 years. The Mercury News summed it up with their recommendation. You may have read it before, that Bob Jonsen is the best candidate who can bring those new ideas, implement the reform, change the culture within Sheriff's Office, and restore trust and integrity to the organization. I'm really proud of all the support I have throughout the county, from elected officials all the way up and down the line. And it's time for change. So I ask you to vote for change and vote Bob Jonsen for sheriff. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Jensen.
Well, when the Mercury News endorsed, I got the "We Like You Too" award and probably a gift card to McDonald's. But I appreciated the fact that they said I could start the job from day one. I think that their determination, based on what I spoke with the people there, was that they thought the whole insider-outsider thing. And I think people should be aware that there's somebody who came into the race very late, purportedly after being shoulder tapped by somebody who wanted somebody from their jurisdiction in there. I don't think that's the reason to be sure. I think somebody who's poured their heart and soul, who was given a chance when they were 21 years old, who became top copy in the academy, who ran every division, and who then fought the current sheriff. The current sheriff now, and I exposed so much of what's gone on now because people were hurting, not just us, the community. If you think that gun permits, you think that promotions internally, think about cases where she had influence. There was a power wheel. There was something that wanted longevity and more power, and I'm just not about that. Again, every day I'm going to get up, I'm going to try and be a better person. I'm going to lead, and I'm not going to take the shortcuts. I have been fighting long and hard for this because the people deserve better. Excellent police services, excellent public service. So that's why I'm endorsed by so many, and it's bipartisan. And so I love the fact that I'm going to be able to reach across the table and get help everywhere. I really appreciate the people that have listened so long, that have heard me. I hope they go to the website and find out my story, because it's one that everybody has a story. And I just hope this one is the one that fixes the sheriff's office. I'd appreciate your vote.
On behalf of Sue Dremen and myself and all of us at the Palo Alto Weekly, I just want to thank you two so much for participating in our debate tonight. We are grateful for your willingness to serve, and we're really amazed by the wealth of experience that each one of you brings. So thank you for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. If anyone wants to see a rewatch of tonight's forum, it will be posted on paloaltoonline.com/YouTube in the morning. And if you want to find out more about local elections and all the different races that are going on, just hop on over to paloaltoonline.com.